Hi guys, BuildZoid here, and today we're going to be taking a look at some oscilloscope shots of a running 8086K in a Maximus XI Gene. So yeah, anyway, right now it's starting up, and we're going to go through a variety of settings, so yeah. Anyway, what you're seeing right there, that's just a thing the CPU does. Like, I've been trying, initially I thought it's some kind of random, so you see those spikes there, right? So initially I thought that was some kind of random interference coming from somewhere, but considering it actually looks like this, which is like a pretty normal shape for load start, LLC compensates late because, you know, the voltage regulators can't keep up with CPU current draw transitions, no matter how hard they try. And then up here we have load release. So, you know, we have a little bit of overshoot. But admittedly, right now we're running like a stupid amount of load line calibration because I don't remember what's the last settings I'm on here. So, yeah, we're on level 8, so you can't really be surprised. If we go down to something like level 1, which is much more easy, well, that's like, I'm not sure if level 1's less than Intel spec or Intel spec, but it's really low. Well, actually, it's really high amounts of V-droop or very low, you know, load line calibration setting in the ASUS BIOS. So we're going to go to level 1. We're also going to go to 500 kilohertz switching frequency. That's the default for this motherboard. And yeah, we're going to keep everything else on extreme for now. I don't really want to have other effects going on. So that's kind of that. That's taken care of. We're going to go with, yeah, let's go with 1.38 volts. Otherwise, actually, no, we'll just underclock the CPU more. It's like if you're messing around with VRM settings and you don't want the system to crash, you just make things worse. Just underclock everything. So yeah, we're not even doing like, actually, I think we're doing a little bit better than like stock 9900K settings right now, but this is an 8086K. Why are we on an 8086K? I couldn't be bothered to pull a 9900K out of the system that it lives in. If we zoom out a bit, we're 200 microseconds. Okay, 2 milliseconds. So yeah, and you can see those spikes, and that's just CPU doing things. Every time the voltage drops, that's just basically the CPU doing things. So Windows is loading right now, so we just have a mess on the oscilloscope. That's the technical term. It's just a mess. Anyway, if you move the mouse, you get a mess. If you run Cinebench, Cinebench is actually pretty quiet once it gets moving. So we're gonna increase our time scale here. We're also gonna raise our graph up a bit. Go all the way to like, let's go 500 milliseconds. So we're not going to see a lot of detail, but we are going to see a lot of stuff. And we're going to roll the trigger back a bit. So there we go. Yeah. I'm going to wait for that, and then I'm going to hit run. So there you can see Cinebench start. And then after it starts, you can see it's actually pretty level. So, yeah, that's Cinebench. Not really all that much of a mess in it. And of course, the voltage is way down because we have, you know, a ton of V-droop because we're on the lowest LLC setting. So, yeah. And then it returns to normal like that. And if we move the mouse, get that lovely mess over there. Anyway, now we're going to try take a closer look at Cinebench running. So I actually want to figure out how far it drops. We're going to run Cinebench again. Yeah, okay, it goes all the way down here. So we're going to trigger on there. We're going to zoom in. We're going to turn that to center. No, return to center. Yeah, okay. And we're going to go down to like, I think on 10 milliseconds we can capture it. We're going to go like this. I'm going to put, there we go. So that's, I'm going to wait for it to flatten out. Okay, good. Now we're going to put the thing in single mode. Bam! So that's, I think, that should be Cinebench load start. Yeah, that's all we captured. So we can zoom in on some of these. So let's do that. I should have maybe captured like more a longer time period, but we can do the same. We can do it again at like 20 milliseconds instead. So just take a look around, and I don't think so. Right now we have really low load line calibration, so I don't think we're gonna see anything particularly messy. Like right here, you can see that the VRM just absolutely has no issue with this. Right there's no real deviation between that. Just a nice smooth transition downwards, and we roll over to here. Blech. Roll over to here. There we go. Actually, you know what? I should blow this up. Because nobody cares about Cinebench anymore. This is what we care about. So then we can zoom in. And yeah, this is all like we do see some spikes, but honestly, that's the CPU. That's not the VRM. Like the VRM couldn't do anything about that, no matter how hard it tried. Because yeah, like there's some of those transitions are just too fast for the VRM to keep up with. So yeah, also some of them are just going to be the load line as well. So yeah, anyway, I don't think we're going to see anything particularly, like I don't think we have enough LLC right now to see anything super. Yeah, like this right here is just the CPU doing its thing. So that all looks very controlled. More like CPU doing its thing. Out a bit. Oh, there we go. So it was a bit too quick on the knob. So go. So here we have like a textbook transient, right? So voltage, we start there, then we drop right down there, and then the VRM overcompensates a little bit, so we get that little rise, and then it levels off to where it should be. And then we have like a textbook load release where the the CPU stops pulling current, so the voltage shoots up, hits that spike over there, VRM overcompensates again, so we get a little dip, and then it levels off again. And then you can just see kind of the repetition of that pattern a few times, and then the CPU goes back to not being silly. So we can go through here. Okay, there's nothing for ages and ages. Okay, so that's that's just a bug. Just ignore that occurred. Wait, I wanted to check this out right here. Yeah, no, not much there. Let's keep scrolling through. Seem to be getting worse. Yeah. Okay, well, this is what I get for having like a budget oscilloscope, I guess. I have no idea what's causing those either. So we've already like it's stopped right now. So I don't know why the data's getting messed up. But yeah, so here we have some more textbook load transitions. No big deal. Go through all of this. And then it levels off again. Let's check this out. This is actually what, this looks well controlled. Yeah, that's well controlled. That's basically, that's smooth. It's nice and smooth. Then and so we get this pattern like a few times, like over and over, right? So again, we have a bunch of load transitions that are really obvious. Zoom all the way out. Yeah, so that's all I captured. I mean, we can go through this, but we won't really see anything more than what I just showed you. It's going to be just more of the same, really. So at this point, we're just going to go run. So there, it's running again. And we will now go back into the OS. And I guess we could try capture 20 milliseconds of Cinebench starting. Actually, I should have left the trigger as low as it was before. We're going to put it in single. And run. Bam. Okay, well, yeah, that didn't really capture much more than I got before. Oh, no, we actually got the full start of Cinebench. So if we go all the way over here. Now, ideally, I would also have some really high-end current sensing probes, and we could... Which, actually, I could build, like, a current sensing thing, but I'm incredibly unmotivated to do that, because... It's a hassle. Depends on how much interest this video has. If people are interested in seeing more testing like this, I'm going to work on getting more measurement data to display on the screen. Because, yeah, as it is, it's just like, I'm not really interested. So, yay, we got some more textbook transitions over there. More of the same. Right, so... And here we just have the CPU being a mess. Zoom out a bit. That kind of looks like the CPU went low current draw and then suddenly started up again, but not really anything all that interesting. I mean, the voltage for this whole thing is super low because, again, we're running a ton of ton of droop. So, yeah, then the CPU just does CPU things, which leads to this mess right here. What's this like? Yeah, so that's just, like, yeah, that's just the CPU. We go through all of this. I think here we should have some pretty nice... Yeah, so a really obvious transient. Like, so that's a load release transient right there. Really obviously. And then we have a load start after that as well. It's all very well and good. Zoom out a bit more. So you kind of get the idea, right? I think, yeah. We're almost at the end of the graph of Cinebench here. So I think you get the idea. So that's all nice and well controlled, and, you know, it didn't look like a horrible mess. So let's run some other workloads, right? Let's run something like, say, Prime 95. And Prime 95 is actually pretty quiet, at least if you run small FFTs. So I'm also going to get core temp because I don't remember, like, anytime you run something as heavy as Prime, it's a good idea to have temperature monitoring as far as I'm concerned. So we run small FFTs. Actually, let's zoom all the way out to, like, nope, that's zooming in. 500 milliseconds, and we're going to put this way back here. Ta-da! And I'm just going to start it once it gets starts rolling again. Yeah. So it starts so quickly that we just see the whole thing fall off a cliff. Yay! Okay, well, that's not what I was hoping for. But we might be able to catch Prime 95 transitioning from low load to... From full load to idle. So I'm going to try catch that. I think we can do it at 10 milliseconds because it's really, like, it stops all the threads really nice and fast. But we have so much redroop right now that I don't think it's going to be that we're going to see any issues. Like anything worth being concerned about. So we're going to go like that. Single. Oh, yeah. So you can see how quickly it transitions, right? Because the the whole thing is all the way over here, which is kind of unintentional. I should have probably kept it centered then, but anyway, if we zoom in, so here's the main part where, like, so you can actually kind of see, like, the threads start stopping here, right? That's how we get this mess over here. Then the threads actually all stop at this point, I think. And then, well, maybe a couple cores, like maybe 1 or 2 cores are still running something. And we just kind of go through this, and really nothing much happens. So that's a whole lot of nothing right there, as far as I'm concerned. We don't really see anything super concerning, right? So... oh. I'm going to check this out. But I don't think this is going to be all that interesting. I mean, the voltages for this whole thing are super low, right? Like, our average voltage, if we zoom all the way out, is like 1.3 volts for this. And the max voltage is 1.39. Is it? Yeah, 1.39 maximum voltage. So, yeah, no big deal throughout that whole thing. So, it's kind of that. Anyway, so instead what we're going to do is we're going to run a custom test of Prime 95. Well, actually, so, you know, so that was small FFTs, and you could see how the voltage while it was running was really quite stable. So we can do it again, right? There's nothing stopping me from running it a bunch of times. So if we run it again, yeah, you can see how basically it's just one little fat line that sits down here, and it just kind of sits there. And that's kind of that. And our minimum voltage right now is like 1.2 volts, and I should have prepared a little notepad so that I could write this stuff down so that I don't make mistakes. But anyway, so yeah, minimum voltage, we're looking at like 1.2 volts. So So 0.2 V, and our RMS and average voltage are like 1.21 volts. So, right, so that's kind of that. But now we're going to run something that I stumbled across while messing around with the oscilloscope. Actually, no. So now I'm going to show you why it is that, like, say, Intel burn test is considered a better stress test than Prime 95. So you can see our temperatures over here. We're in, like, under, like, yeah, low 60s. Well, 60s to 70s for temperature. Temperature's a rough indication of power consumption, so that's why I'm using that. We could also go off of the average voltage while it's running. That also works. But yeah, so, you know, a lot of people will claim that Linpack, or I'm just using IBT here, which is just Linpack, just with a nice UI. So Linpack is kind of known as being heavier than Prime 95. And more sensitive to instability. And that's kind of because it looks like this. So it's starting. It's starting. There, it looks like that. Though it's not actually, so it's far more inconsistent in terms of load. And at least at higher LLCs, it actually leads to some interesting consequences. Though right now we're not seeing anything all that messy. We're at 1.27 average. Okay, so they're kind of leveled off again. But our minimum voltage is like 1.23 volts, and our peak to peak is like 190 millivolts, right? So, very noisy. Quite the mess. But and this is basically like, as far as like, I assume this is basically the kind of thing that you can't fix with like the VR, like any kind of VRM switching frequency or anything like that, because that's just switching noise from the CPU. So this is basically an output filtering stress test, or at least that's my theory currently. I'm gonna work on testing that, because I'm obviously just sort of getting into this kind of testing. It's something I've wanted to do for ages and ages and ages, but figuring out how to do this properly, kind of difficult. So yeah, and even right now, I don't think this is necessarily the best test methodology I have here, but it's kind of like, I'm just kind of showing you the progress of how this is going. So yeah, anyway, so that was Linpack, right? And that was AVX. That was AVX accelerated Linpack. So, and if you're wondering about what's with the frequency down there, just ignore that. It's an old version of core temp. The temperature readings work, but the frequency readout is completely wrong. So, yeah. Anyway, so this is what we use for our frequency readout. Now, this is an AVX version of Prime. But anyway, we're gonna run a custom FFT size of 120K and another 120K. And the thing about this setting is that it should be, yeah, that. So this, I stumbled across this because I was just messing around with Prime 95, looking at, like, what is the noisiest Prime 95, and yeah, that. It's actually so bad that, unlike the other stuff, it crashes because it's so much CPU just noise that it just crashes. So we're going to have to raise the voltage for that one. So that's kind of like my new gold standard for VRM abuse. That test right there, that preset, 120K FFT size, is by far the noisiest thing that I've found that you can run on a CPU. I'm not sure, maybe there's some other things that would be worse, but it is extremely noisy. And as a result, it tends to crash really, really quickly compared to all kinds of other tests. So we can actually bring up the LLC a bit. And I think it was at 110 millivolts peak to peak. So that's kind of what I track with it. So on level 1. So let's see what it does on like level 4. We're not going to go through every single one of the levels, or we'd be here tomorrow, which I'm not really interested in doing. Oh, actually, we could zoom in on one of these spikes right here. My trigger's way off. There we go. Yeah, so that actually looks like... So, if we go single... So I've concluded that this is the CPU doing something and not some like random environmental noise, because that looks like a load start, then the VRM compensates, and then that load release. Like the time scale is pretty reasonable. So yeah, that might actually just be the CPU doing things. CPUs do weird stuff. I have no idea what it's actually doing. It's roughly like 65 hertz on these spikes. So every like 65,000 times a second, the CPU is doing something. And I just don't know what it is that it's doing. So anyway, we're going to zoom all the way back out. And I guess we'll like check out Cinebench or something first. Yeah, let's check out Cinebench, right? Cinebench is to check out. And then we're of course going to do the trial by fire, as I like to call it, of 120k FFT size prime 95. So yeah, let's run that. Okay, so I think the probe is getting knocked around, which is causing the errant readings. I was just adjusting the probe holder, so... Okay. I'm gonna put this down here. Put it in single. Okay, it's not triggering, good. Ah, there. We caught Cinebench starting. Though we caught it because of those giant spikes. Those are interesting. Actually, let's check one of those out, right? Like, since we caught them, might as well take a look at them. What is that? I have no idea what that is. I've not actually seen that earlier. Like, I've been messing around with this testing for a while, and that right there is new. Anyway, what else can we check out? Well, let's see if we can look at some of the startup load transitions. The zoom out. Okay, actually, this is such a mess that... we're gonna do the whole thing again. Except at a smaller time scale. Yeah, this should work out. There we go. So now we'll check some of the... I mean, we're not seeing any deviations above set voltage, so that's fine. Okay, so you can kind of see how we've raised the load line calibration, and this load transition right here, you can see how the voltage still dips way down because the VRM can't actually respond to that. And then eventually the VRM's like, oh, wait a minute, we should do something about this, and that's when you get the overcompensation, and then it levels off. Because, like, this voltage level right here is what the load line is set to, but this is what the VRM can actually survive in a really rapid transition. Because basically what's happening is you need to force... oops, hit the camera, sorry guys. But basically what causes that... where is it? So what causes that massive drop right here, which actually... it's gonna... yeah, okay, we're not gonna do that because it's gonna move everything around, and then I'm gonna have to, like, go through a hassle to get everything realigned for the measurements. So, anyway, what causes that massive drop right there is basically you have current flowing through your inductors, right? And inductors resist changes in current. So if you have 10 amps flowing through your inductors and the CPU suddenly decides to pull 100 amps, you get that because the inductors are going to resist that change in current. So in order to... because basically, when the CPU requests more current, it doesn't actually request more current. It basically is like having a resistor that goes from being, say, a 10 ohm resistor to suddenly being a 1 ohm resistor. right? So the inductor just drops your output voltage because the goal of the inductor is to maintain 10 amps output, right? And if the voltage is low enough, then at 1 ohm, 1 volt at 1 ohm is the same kind of current as like 10 volts at 10 ohms, right? So the inductor is going to start pushing the voltage down to try maintain the same current output. Now, the VRM can actually prevent this because it'll just turn on the high side MOSFETs potentially in all of the phases at the same time. Really depends on how advanced the voltage controller you're looking at is. There's like a whole bunch of like fancy transient response optimization control schemes that are actually like some of the like that's one of the things that makes a lot of difference between like a high-end international rectifier and some of the really cheap crappy controllers you can get, because there's a lot of controllers that'll have a million phases. They're just not necessarily going to be very good at using all of the phases. Yeah, so the controller can basically do things like put all of the phases in parallel to effectively reduce your output inductance, because suddenly your inductors are all in parallel towards 12 volts, which can give you much faster current transitions upwards. The other thing is, there's a whole bunch of control schemes with the PWM that you can do to get better transient response. But ultimately, it still comes down to the fact that the VRM just can't immediately respond to the change in current draw, and that's why we get that dip. And eventually, the VRM's like, oh, wait a minute, the current draw is going up, and it starts to compensate for the increase in current draw. So that's why we get it ultimately overcompensates because the control loop can't respond instantly to the increase in current draw, and it also can't immediately catch when it's like, oh, we're pushing enough current. So yeah, that's why you get the little bump after the dip. Anyway, and then on load release, which is what we see right here, you get the opposite effect where basically we're pulling a lot of current, and then the CPU suddenly goes like high resistance. You can think of it as going high resistance. So the inductor's like, wait a minute, we need more voltage to keep pushing the same amount of current, which causes that voltage spike. And the high-end voltage controllers, what they'll actually do is they'll do things like turn off your low-side MOSFET and keep it turned off, just not stop using the low-side MOSFET, which will force the excess energy stored up in the inductors to be burnt off on the body diode of the low-side MOSFET, because there's a voltage drop across the body diode of, say, like 0.7 volts. So that's just 0.7 volts of power that go up they go up into heat, essentially. So it can convert the excess energy stored up in the inductors into heat, and that will reduce the spike. Well, that levels the spike off eventually. And then we go back to steady state for the rest of this right here. And initially, that initial rise will, like the initial, the initial jump that you get or initial drop will depend on a number of factors, like your output output capacitors, and it'll also depend on your inductors. If you have very high inductance inductors, they actually want to maintain current output more so than if you have very low inductance inductors, which is why, like, one of the... Like, for example, Intel's fully integrated voltage regulator doesn't actually have load line settings because it doesn't need them, because it runs at megahertz switching frequencies and uses super low inductance inductors. So it doesn't need to worry about things like, it doesn't have as much of a error margin as your regular VRM running at like 300 kilohertz. Because, the CPU can transition current draw much faster than the voltage controller can transition the phases. Whereas if you have something like the fully integrated voltage regulator, which runs at, even hundreds of megahertz, I think. I'm not entirely sure on the full spec of the Intel fully integrated voltage regulators, but like that thing is so fast that it doesn't need load line. But normal motherboard VRMs, you can't build them that fast because there's a limit to how quickly you can switch power MOSFETs before they start producing way more heat than is worth dealing with. So, yeah. Anyway, we're going to zoom out of that. And now we're going to... So, Prime 90... I guess we can take a look at Prime 95 now. Nope. So we're going to get core temp again. We're going to see higher temperatures. So I didn't actually expect the 120K FFT size to crash, but it is a thing that it does because it is just so damn heavy. Like, it's so Like, it's both hot, right? It's a pretty hot test. It pulls almost as much power as small FFTs, but it also is far more inconsistent, which means that the VRM has a hell of a time dealing with it. All right, we're at 100 milliseconds. So put this back so that we can hopefully... So I can hopefully time the start of Prime 95 a bit so that we can see the waveform for a bit. Okay, well, damn it. I should have pressed the stop button faster. But anyway, you can see that now it's pretty level. We still have those spikes of the CPU just kind of doing whatever it is that it's doing. Which actually we could trigger off some of those and zoom in on them, I guess. Let's see. Because I actually want to see what those look like. We're going to put it in single. Okay, so they just look like a mess. At this point, I honestly have no idea what any part of that is. Yeah, so that's quite awful. Zoom back out. So yeah, that's Prime 95 running right there. Pretty steady. So we're gonna stop it. There's your... Yeah, but you can still, like, we're not really seeing any, like, super massive voltage deviations, which... What voltage are we set to? I think we're at, like, 1.35, right? Something like that. No, we can't be at 1.35. What's it at? Yeah, we're at 1.39 RMS, so I'm going to assume that we're at, like, 1.39 volts in BIOS or something like that. So we can just ask CPU-Z. Asus motherboards have a 1.37. Interesting. Oh right, we're on the CPU socket, so we're gonna measure a little bit higher. Anyway, what did I want to run? Oh, let's just throw IBT at it instead. Let's go high. So yeah, IBT starts out pretty mild, and then it becomes this horrible mess right here. Still not really that bad. It's not even as hot as Prime 95. Let's see. Do we still have CPU-Z open? Let's open it. There we go. So we should be seeing the AVX. Like, I should have an AVX offset on this. So that's why I wanted to... Yeah, okay. There. So now AVX is running, and we're at 4.8 gigahertz again. And yeah, you can see just how IBT is far less consistent than Intel burn test. So what are we at? Like 110 millivolts and 1.34 volts average, 1.29 minimum, 1.3, 1.29 minimum. So let's just do small FFTs again, because I do wonder what the minimum voltage is going to be. Okay, it's actually lower for small FFTs, so that's fun. Yeah, so in this scenario, small FFTs should actually be like harder for the CPU, like for your system stability right now. So what are we at? 1.27, 1.26 volts. Also, stupid OBS, I can't see the microphone levels. Yeah, so 1.26, 1.27. Stop all workers. And now we're going to run VRM abuse test. 120. 120. Run in place. Ah, still the same minimum voltage. But yeah, this tends to sometimes this has a tendency to blue screen more often than the other tests. Shit. Why? Oh, I think it hit 1.25 for a bit. Yeah, okay, it is hitting 1.25 for a bit. Let's actually zoom in on it. Where's the trigger at? That's 1.25 volts. Let's slowly bring it up. It's not that low. But if we zoom in on this, then yeah, it's just a mess. And that's the... It's kind of, right, there we go. That's kind of the peak of that. So we're at what for maximum voltage? We're at 1.4 volts. So, yep, it's getting up there. Yeah, 1.41. Minimum 1.27. Capture a couple of them. Yeah, but it doesn't really go above 1.4. So, yeah, that's not really, like, concern-worthy in any way, shape, or form. Since, yeah, it is a mess, but the voltage is still staying relatively low. We're going to stop that test. And I guess we can raise the LLC one more time. And as soon as the display output initializes, we start getting those random spikes. So that's how I've concluded that it is actually the CPU doing something and not, like... Well, that's the other part of the whole CPU doing something and not environmental noise. Because initially I was like, that's too low frequency to be... Like, I don't know why there'd be some periodic noise like that. Or periodic spikes like that. And so for, like, I was messing around with, like, disconnecting HDMI, running the system with no GPU, running, like, I was steadily just disconnecting everything I could get my hands on, and it wouldn't go away. So at this point, I'm just like, okay, it's just the CPU. Just does that. Oh, so we were at 1.3 volts. Yeah, so it was maintaining regulation just fine as far as I'm concerned, considering that we're on the back of the CPU socket, right? So, now the recommended level for Asus ROG motherboards if you're doing day-to-day overclocking is level 6. So I guess let's check what level 6 looks like. And then we can go up to like level 8. Yeah, so you can already see that the spikes have just like... They used to be always downwards, and now they're upwards because if we zoom in on one... We'll trigger off the top edge. My triggers. Okay, Windows, stop freaking out, damn it. Oh, nope, they're still under. Okay. Okay, well, now we can't see the... anything. Yeah, in them. So previously you could see how it was like loaded up. Well, actually, if we raise the LLC even more, then we're going to see the voltage go up and then a load release spike. So right now it's still pretty well controlled. Right? Like we get the dip, but we don't get like some ridiculous amount of overshoot. I mean, we are, you know, 50 millivolts above. Well, okay, not even 50. We're like 60 millivolts above what we set in the BIOS. But the thing is, you might be like, oh, is that actually concerning for the lifespan of your CPU? Well, no, because this is like we're in microseconds here. And CPU degradation is a function of current draw, voltage, and temperature. Because there's current, like there's effects that, well, actually, temperature basically amplifies all degradation effects. So, like, running 200 amps at 90 degrees is significantly worse for the lifespan of a CPU than 200 amps at 10 degrees. Or, well, yeah, than like 200 amps at 10 degrees or even lower temperatures. Though usually what you also get like with the temperature is that actually for a given voltage you pull less current as you lower temperature. So if you're at like minus 20 at 1.4 volts, that's less current than at like 90 degrees or something, right? So degradation is definitely, it's not just about your voltage. It's about your current, because the like electromigration is just a current effect. And it does get worse at higher temperatures. So if you have a lot of current at high temperature, you have a lot of electromigration. If you have very little current at high temperature, you get less electromigration, which is kind of why like laptop CPUs can sort of get away with running at really high temperatures, though they do tend to break their packaging eventually. So yeah, they don't so much degrade as just physically disintegrate, because of the temperature cycling. But the other thing is just like since this is going to be like that voltage spike right there is going to be actually a relatively low current draw because that's on load release. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. Also, it's several microseconds. So it's not going to do much to your CPU, right? So idling on 1.42 volts is not as, or idling on 1.45 volts is not as bad as like running a load at 1.45 volts. That's what I'm kind of trying to get at. I almost made a video entirely just about talking about like CPU degradation, what it is and what causes it, but for some reason I decided that I don't want to finish it or something. So anyway, we're not going to be able to trigger on anything at this point because the load line calibration is so high that, like previously I was relying on the V-droop to have a trigger point, but at this point I think it's going to be like those spikes we have in here are going to be at the same level as where the voltage droops to, if it even droops at all. So here goes. Yeah, see? Yeah, we're not triggering off of that. Oh, wait, we might be able to. Actually, let's slide that down a bit. I might be able to trigger off the tops of those spikes. So I'll try that. Zoom out a bit. Move this back a bit. Keep in mind we're seeing the voltage go up because we're on the back of the CPU socket. So there's a voltage drop across the resistance of the CPU socket itself. So it's normal that with this level of LLC, we're seeing a higher average voltage. So RMS and average voltage are going to be higher under load because we are measuring from the back of the CPU socket. Now then, see if I can trigger off of those spikes. I set it up. Oh, yeah, I set it up wrong. So we're going to have to do that again. Why are you... Oh, right. It just, I thought it triggered again. Set it lower. Yeah, so the main concern is that it doesn't randomly get triggered at idle. Yeah, okay. So we have a mess, and we can look in detail at the mess. So now we're starting to get some like pretty serious overshoot of like 1.51 volts on some of these, which let's see. Like these are obviously correlated to like the previous you know. So like here at this end we have like Cinebench running, I think. Or no, this is 50 milliseconds, so this is still actually transitioning into Cinebench running, but along here, we should start seeing things that actually look like, yeah. So, yeah, this is that good old textbook load start that we used to have, right? Where it was like, it would come down, and then it would come back up, and it would like slightly overshoot and then level off. Yeah, that's that dip right there. So you can see that the load line calibration, like since we're running level 6, the voltage comes back up higher. But it hasn't actually done anything about this voltage drop right here because the VRM can't actually catch that. So that's still there, which you'd expect. Like, so the spike, the dip's still there, but now it looks like a random spike instead of something that's actually like if we had more load line calibration, that would actually look under control, or relatively under control. But here it's just like, oh yeah, that voltage fell off a cliff. VRM can't really do anything about that. And let's look at this mess right here. So this looks awful. Yeah. So load start, voltage falls off a cliff, VRM recovers, load release, voltage jumps up because the inductors need to discharge, and, you know, VRM recovers, load start, voltage falls off a cliff, load release, voltage jumps back up. So yeah, lovely mess right here. And this looks like it might have actually started ringing right there for a bit. It cleaned itself up, but yeah, this is not good right here. Um, but I mean, like, it's not good in the sense, like, you don't want a voltage regulator doing this, but it's not actually, like, to the CPU, this is not actually dangerous, right? Because that's between, like, the top of that is 1.43 volts, and the bottom of that is, like, what, 1.35, yeah, so who cares? But that does not look like a well-controlled transition between one voltage level and another. Mostly because I think what happened here is CPU went low, like, we had a bit of, like, CPU loaded up, CPU unloaded, CPU loaded up again, and then unloaded so quickly that actually the voltage regulator, actually it might not have done anything at that point. The voltage regulator could have just super overcompensated for some reason. But yeah, that seems to be just the CPU going back and forth between load and idle so quickly that the VRM just freaked out at this point. Or at least that's what I assume happened, because that's what it looks like to me, at least. Keep in mind that I've not been doing this that long, so we should get, like, a really crap motherboard and check out, like, some super low-end 4-phase or 3-phase thing, right, and see what that looks like. I'd imagine even when we're, like, in the steady state zone, we'd be seeing much more peak to peak. Just in the steady state area, if we had, like, a 3 or 4-phase board that's really, like, super low end, and, you know, it's the kind of board where there's barely enough capacitance for anything, because capacitors cost too much at that point. So then we got a mess here, and then we've got another, yeah, it's following that same pattern as before. So if we zoom in on this, okay, so we have some like, minor load transitions here, but the big thing is this again. Actually, I think that looks exactly it looks really similar to, yeah, it does look really similar to this right here, doesn't it? Actually, if we zoom in on that, nope. That looked like something in larger scale. I think we looked at this one right here. Yeah, we did. So, so then we get that pattern again of some kind of load start. Voltage just falls off a cliff. VRM can't really do anything about that. We get a load release, I assume. Yep, looks like a load release to me. And then we get into this lovely mess again, where we just have a, yeah, so we have a load start, load release, load start, load release, and, oh, and here, yeah, okay, actually it might have just been the CPU last, oh, nope, looks like we got some ringing again, because of the fast transitions between, like, idle and full load and idle and full load, though it could have just been the CPU doing something as well. Right, like, that's the other thing, is just, I don't know if we're looking at things the CPU did, or if it's the VRM that's doing that. It'd be cool if I had, like, a 8-channel, well, actually, for this motherboard, I'd only need, like, a 6-channel, because this is a 5-phase V-Core VRM, so we could actually monitor the PWM signals of all of the phases, and then take a look at, like, what all of the phases were actually doing when this was happening with the output, right, which I think would be really cool, but that would require a significantly more expensive oscilloscope than what I'm willing to buy, especially considering how infrequently I've been using this one. So it's like, it doesn't make sense for me to buy a super high-end scope if, you know, I'm not going to use it that much. And then we've got just, yeah, more of the same, right? Like, nothing new. So, yeah, just the same thing over and over. Zoom way out. And honestly, so these spikes actually, like, yeah, they look pretty bad, but considering, like, the spikes are when the CPU pulls the least current. So I'm, like, you're not going to actually be getting that much electromigration on these. The biggest concern with these spikes is if they got so high that they would start causing, like, gate oxide breakdown. Because that's a purely voltage-driven effect, and that's the thing that kills your GPU or CPU when you know, yeet the voltage to 2 volts and it immediately dies for no apparent reason. That's normally gate oxide breakdown, because you've just blown straight through the gates at that point. So, yeah. If you apply enough voltage to anything, you're just going to blow straight through it at some point. Even air, which is not a conductor, right? If you apply, like, I think it's 1,000 volts across an inch or something, it'll actually break the air down, and you get sparks. So, yeah, with enough voltage, nothing is an insulator. Nothing is a good enough insulator if you apply enough voltage. So, yeah, and basically that's the main concern with the spikes is just like they could get so like if you were on liquid nitrogen or something and you were running really high voltages and then, you know, the CPU warmed up a bit for some reason, like you lost thermal paste contact and you had one of these spikes hit the CPU then, yeah, that would probably kill your chip. That wouldn't really have much of a problem killing your chip. So that's no good. And I think this is just, this right here I think is just an artifact from us zooming in way in, because it did that before. Let's run this again. Oh, I should have made that full screen, shouldn't I? Well, too late, guys. I wiped that. We're not gonna try to recapture it. So now let's go check out some Prime 95. This is the quality you pay for on AHOC. Actually, to be fair, no. If you're an AHOC Patreon, then you've seen a even worse version of this video go up on the AHOC Discord. So, yeah. Yeah, and Prime 95 looks actually really well controlled, doesn't it? Yeah. None of that horrible mess here. This Prime 95 is a nice, steady load. Except for this right here, which that's the CPU doing something. I don't know what. That's just the spikes again, which are ever present and impossible to get rid of. So, yeah, that's Prime 95. Actually, so I've tried to capture like a load transient of Prime 95 stopping, but I've not actually managed to see anything. Like the Cinebench stuff we looked at is actually probably the best stuff we've seen. Because I've been trying to get Prime 95 to capture that kind of thing, and it just doesn't do it. Like, it ends in a mess. So if we zoom way out, we're going to go to 500 milliseconds. Which, unfortunately, that also drops our sample rate way down per second. Yeah, we're on, like, 2 million samples, so... Like, the thing is, the thing about the sample rate is if we zoom way in, we're not actually going to have that much data to look at. So, that's why I'm annoyed about that. I think I must have nudged the desk or something. Yeah, that looks like the ground lead came off. Okay, wait. Let me try fix that. Yeah. I would, you know, I've been thinking about just getting some coax and just soldering it directly to the motherboard, but I don't have any on hand, so we're gonna have to... Oh, no, I've made it really bad. Sorry. Well, good job, Buildzoid. You really screwed it up. This is going to take forever to fix. Give me a while. I should zoom in for this so that I have faster feedback on if I'm fixing it or not. I fixed it, I think. Is it? Why? No, we still have those ridiculous spikes in there for some reason. Okay, wait. I'm going to wait for it to... No, it still does it. Oh, wait. It might be a sample rate thing. Alright, no? That's actually a thing? Okay, well, that... No. No way. I've not seen that. Like, I've been messing around with this for a while. This is the first time I'm having these, so I'm gonna... That can't be happening. I want to just check the temperatures. Oh, we are getting pretty hot. Are we thermal throttling by any chance? We are. Oh, yeah, we're thermal throttling. So, you know what? That actually might be the thermal throttle kicking in. Because when it slams on the brakes, that might actually make things just worse for the voltage regulation. So, yeah, that might actually be there for real. That might not be the... Because the thing is, if the ground lead comes off, then you get the same kind of... Well, you kind of get the same thing. Okay, so I guess I'm going to go have to fix the... We're going to drop the core voltage, because otherwise it's just going to overheat again, and it's going to start doing that. Like, I assume that's what was causing those. Oh, damn it, I missed the BIOS. No Windows. I wanted the BIOS. Screw you. Oh, right. It shut down. I'm pretty sure those massive spikes were caused by overheating, so we're just going to drop the voltage a bit, and they should be gone. Like, we're not going to change the load line calibration. We're just going to make the average voltage lower, so... Ah, come on. Why is I hate this board. Seriously. Like, the only board that I have that has a similarly laggy BIOS is the X299 Dark. That should hopefully be enough of a voltage reduction to fix that. I guess I could also turn off the thermal throttle. But I like my 86K, so we're not going to do that because I don't want to break it. We're going to totally crash when I run the 120K FFT size, though. At this point, like, that's definitely going to crash. And this video is an hour. Good job, me. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this video again, except like shorter and less terrible for the general public. Except it's not turning out like that. It's not turning out like that at all, is it? Oh boy. Okay. Small FFTs. Zoom way out. Yeah, this is why you have temperature monitoring. Yeah, so now the spikes are gone. So it was just like the thermal throttle, probably. Wait a minute. Coming back. Pretty sure they're coming back. Oh, no. No, they're still gone. Okay, we're good. Yeah, it's gotta be... Oh. Wait, is it from me moving the mouse or something? Okay, so we evidently have limited time with setting your CPU on fire. So, yeah. Test, stop, and I'm gonna try manually get both. Wait, I'm gonna set this really high. We're gonna put this in single. And... Oh. Well... So, that was like, I was hand triggering it, so I didn't think it would actually work out. Like, I normally have a really slow reaction time, but apparently I nailed it because it is all the way over here. Good job, BuildZoid. Good job. You really screwed that up. So we're gonna try that again. But since I'm apparently incredibly fast today, oops. That's not what I wanted. I want to give myself some leeway, so... Gonna run the torture test again. Small FFTs. Test, stop. Okay, enter, and I'm gonna put the thing in single. Okay, and now I missed it. Good job. So yeah, see, if I had a way to trigger off of current draw, wouldn't it be so much better? It would be so much better. I don't know. Oh wait, no, I know why I'm screwing it up. I'm supposed to put it in advance. Oh wait, we just about caught it at a halfway decent like sample rate. So yeah, but you can see that it doesn't really transition that hard, right? Like you can see here it's running, here it's not. We have a bit of a mess in between, but ultimately the biggest issue throughout this whole thing is the actual random spikes that we get. Well, they're not random, but the CPU doing its thing spikes. So, yeah. Those aren't going away no matter what I do, so we're just going to ignore that. Though, we could zoom in on one of them since we've already stopped. Just check one of those out. It's pretty tall. Yeah, but it's just a mess. Yep, just a mess. So now we're going to run 120K, and I expect this to throw a blue screen. Actually, I should have, well, yeah. This is definitely going to have a much lower minimum voltage than the other test, just because it's going to go to pretty much idle for some parts of it. So I guess we could also try IBT. So actually, I'm going to note down the values again, just so for convenience. Torture test, small FFTs. And I'm mostly just focusing on the minimum voltage, because that's the one that's ultimately going to make you crash. The max voltage is what's going to break your CPU. Maybe. All right, so like 1.35 volts, right? Well, actually, let's zoom out more. That way we have more of a selection. 1.31, 1.3. I swear I saw 1.31 there. Okay, we'll go with 1.32. And now we're going to do test, stop. Okay. Where's Intel burn test? Did I open it yet? No. Let's run IBT. Hi. Oh boy. Please don't blue screen. Okay, so it's starting. And everything goes to hell. Okay, so IBT is still staying within that like 1.32 volts minimum, but as you can clearly see, it is quite the workout for the VRM. It's actually cooler than small FFTs. But yeah, it is noisy as hell. So that's fun to watch. And we should be seeing a result. Yep, see? So it load cycles as well, which I guess is also kind of helps with the test being a test. Actually, we should stop it when it rolls through that like start point. Because it goes really... Like, there's some serious spikes when it like transitions. I'm gonna see if I can catch him. Okay, so now it's gonna go back to that. And... Come on. I think... Wait. Oh, I missed it. Yeah. Okay, wait. So we can put it lower. Now, if we increase the memory size, then IBT will eventually get really, really hot. Or at least it should. Come on. Don't tell me those spikes were like a random fluke and they're not actually there. Oh, oops. Well, it looks like we caught a load release. What's that? Well, we could take a look at this one right here, right? What is it? Okay, that's just a mess. So, yeah. Unfortunately, nothing really worth looking at. Some of this stuff... Oh, no, this is like a pretty good example of like... What is it? Yeah. So, pretty decent example of... But at the end there is... Yeah. That kind of looks like a pretty decent example of a load release. With how it levels off eventually. But, yeah. Other than that, IBT is just a horrible mess. So... This is like... I'm tempted to add a bunch of capacitors to this board and see if it cleans this... Like, the kind of stuff that, like, IBT does, if it cleans that up. So... Yeah, anyway, let's stop. Reset that. What did I want to run next? Oh, yeah. Actually, no. I wanted to try IBT at more memory usage. Maximum. Oh, we only have... Oh, right. We're on a pretty small amount of RAM here, so... Let's see if it gets any hotter. Nope. It does kind of get noisier, maybe? Wait, I'll zoom out a bit. Oh no, it does get hotter. It's doing now 60s instead of 50s. So that's great. So that's what, 150, 150 millivolts peak to peak, I think is the highest one I've seen. But, let's try that 120K Prime 95 FFT size. So because normally that one's even worse than, so actually the in-place large FFTs, that one also gets pretty noisy, but it's not as bad as 120. So I actually found the 120K settings from the in-place large FFTs setting. Yep. So now we're hitting, yeah, so this is exactly what I meant, right? We're hitting minimum voltage of 1.3 volts. We're at 180 to 190 even was there for a bit. Millivolts peak to peak. Like, if the VRM could cry, it would. So, yeah, because this is evil. And it's also a pretty hot, like, it's a pretty damn hot test, right? As you can see down here, we're hitting like 70s. So that's the thing. Small FFTs, obviously far hotter. But as far as the minimum voltages go, this is actually worse. Like, we're even hitting like 1.29 here and there. So, yeah. That's why I like... Well, okay, 1.29, we shouldn't blue screen on that yet. Because previously, I think when we were on the lowest LLC level, we were on like 1.27 volts average or something. But yeah, this gives the VRM a workout. Because it is just... It's a mess. Like, it's literally just a mess. There's nothing to it. This is also one thing I'm like wondering, well, what if you added more capacitors? Would that fix this? Okay, wait, let's zoom out a bit. Right, and lower that. So I'm just taking like a bunch of stills of what's going on. Let's actually see the low dips. All right, let's... Right now we're getting like, okay. All right, yeah, so, oh boy. Oh, it's hitting 80s at this point. Still not as hot as at small FFTs though, I don't think. Oh, there we go. We caught one at 1.29 volts. And small FFTs was doing like 1.32. So... Just going to zoom out and run small FFTs one more time as a validation pass that it was actually 1.32. But, yeah, it was like 1.32. I was right. So yeah, small FFTs, far hotter, as you can clearly see, right? Like, it is hellishly hot. But, it's not actually that noisy. At least not in terms of like, well, we still have obviously the spikes, which the CPU just does. But our minimum voltage is still, like, even with the spikes, it's way higher. And if we actually zoom in on a part where the spikes aren't, right? So like, I'm gonna pause it. Right. Wait. Yeah, we're gonna stop. Gonna move the spike off screen. Zoom in on this part, right? Like, this is nice. Like, this is what, 30 millivolts peak to peak. So this is really nice and steady. And it's only if we look at it, you know, with all the spikes that it looks really like a mess. But if we run small FFTs, there's not like a single anything in the entire in the entire waveform that we capture. It's just a mess from start to finish, a mess. So, yeah. this board must hate me at this point for subjecting it to what I've just run through. So, yeah, now, obviously, like, one thing that, I wonder about is, like, how realistic is that 120k FFT test, right? Like, is there any workload that would actually behave like that, right? Like, theoretically, there is, because 120k FFTs does it. So it would be, the thing is, like, would somebody have an application for a piece of code that looks exactly like Prime 95's 120k FFTs? Right? That's the question. As soon as somebody finds a useful use case that looks like that, then, oh boy. But yeah, at the same time, I do eventually want to test some other tests out as well. But for now, I think that this is pretty much all I wanted to take a look at. And we're not going to go all the way up to level 8 because evidently my cooling system can't handle that. We're already, yeah, it's still hit 91. So, yeah, but that's part of why, like the way the voltage, like, falls off a cliff when the CPU just decides that it hates you. Well, basically when the CPU goes under a really high load, the way the voltage falls off a cliff, like, that's why it doesn't necessarily make sense to run a truckload of load line, why it doesn't make sense to run very little V-droop, because if you have very little V-droop, your average voltage is going to be, like, up here somewhere, right? Like, as we saw, your average voltage is going to be way up. Your minimum voltage is still going to be really, really low. So you're still going to crash because your minimum voltage is just so freaking low, right? Because that's what's going to make you crash, is just, like, for a split second, some transistor in some circuit is not going to have enough voltage to switch quickly enough, right? And the higher temperature will actually make that whole thing worse, right? Like, that's the other thing to keep in mind, is that the high temperature actually slows your transistors down. That's a thing it does. So you want like, there's a minimum amount of voltage that's necessary to switch the transistor at the speed necessary for the frequency you want. But at the same time, there's, like, like, higher temperatures will raise that minimum voltage requirement. And if your VRM can't actually keep up with the load transitions of the CPU, running a bunch of load line calibration doesn't actually, like, running a really high load line doesn't actually help you overclock, because your minimum voltage is still going to be really low. You're still going to crash when the CPU, runs into that loading scenario. This whole thing with load line is, like, at ambient overclocking, it's actually not that obvious that you're making your situation worse by raising the load line, because at ambient, the temperature isn't as stability critical as it is on, say, liquid nitrogen overclocking. On liquid nitrogen, when you're doing overclocking with liquid nitrogen, you set the load line wrong, and it's immediately obvious that, like, your stability just goes down the drain. On ambient, that doesn't tend to happen because you're not so temperature sensitive just due to how you're running. So, yeah, it's like, if you're one of those people where you have, like, a 9900K and you're overclocking it, I would be totally cool with running a 9900K at, like, up to 1.42 volts idle, right? And then having a lot of V-droop. That is probably going to get you better overclocking results, depending on your loading scenarios, than having, like, 1.35 volts and a ton of load line, right? Like, and very little V-droop, because ultimately your peak voltage is going to be, like, way up. Your minimum voltage is going to be way down. Your average voltage is not going to be actually that low, so you're going to be producing a ton of heat, because ultimately your average voltage is pretty much what dictates your heat. Not really, but roughly it will. And your stability is going to be dictated by the minimums, and your degradation by, well, potential, like, the peaks depends on how long you stay at them, right? Like, if you were really borderline to, like, insta-kill voltage and you're running a ton of, well, very little V-droop, then it's making things definitely worse. Yeah, at normal, like, daily settings, it actually wouldn't make that much of a difference, because the spikes are so short that I wouldn't be concerned about them. But, yeah, hopefully that was somewhat interesting and useful information that I've presented here. And I do plan to do this kind of testing with more motherboards, because I do want to, like, see if, there's, like, obviously, now that I've kind of figured out some method of doing this testing, I want to go between different motherboards and check out, like, which motherboard has the best, voltage regulation. Now, ideally, I'd be taking these measurements from the CPU and not from the motherboard, but, you know, I don't really feel, well, like, there is a way to do that. Like, you could just attach probes to the CPU, like, voltage, like, well, it would be kind of hard to do. But, like, I have a theory on how I could do that. It's just, like, I don't have spare, like, CPUs to do it with. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it for the video. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, you can support the channel through Patreon or through buying shirts or stickers or posters or socks on Teespring. Yes, there's actual socks on there. Most because they're a wordplay on they're just kind of a joke based on like gigabyte SoC motherboards. If you say it if you say giga, like I call them sock motherboards. So now there's overclocking socks as well. Literally. Anyway, yeah, also huge thanks to the patron. Like the patrons actually kind of brought you this video because I bought the Maximus XI Gene thanks to a very, actually not even the Patreon, that was like a really generous supporter of the channel, just was like, Buildzoid, I want you to test the Maximus XI Gene. So huge thanks to the guy for funding the purchase of that motherboard, of this motherboard. And then patrons paid for the oscilloscope. Patrons paid for the case that we're doing the testing in. So yeah, huge thanks to all of you guys and for supporting the channel and making this kind of thing possible. Hopefully it was interesting. And I'm going to end the video here because it's way too damn long at this point. Goodbye.